So today we're going to talk about separating securities and how to make sure that if you're going to sell one of your properties now or in the future, that you're going to be able to keep that cash. And what we want to make sure is that, if you want that money, for your retirement fund or to put into a business or another property, that you don't end up selling a property that has debt on it or a security on it from the bank, thinking that you're going to be able to keep all of the money, it's called net proceeds from that sale, when in reality you're going to have to pay the bank back more money than you anticipated. And so let's have a look at a few quick examples. So on this side, what we've got is 3 properties in a portfolio that's all at the same bank. And this is quite common. And whether you have your property or one or two of the properties in a look-through company or trust, or you think there's like a clear separation between your portfolio within the bank, quite often it's actually at the bank's discretion. So let's have a look. Let's say you're thinking, you want to buy another property. You found you want to upgrade one of your rentals from a cash flow, negative or neutral property to something that's has a bit more potential for cash flow or capital gains. So you're going to sell this property here, and once you've sold that property, you're going to complete the sale, complete the purchase of another property. So in this scenario, there's $600,000 on this property of debt, and the property's worth $800K. So you think, okay, sell the property, I'm going to be able to keep the $200,000 difference. But as you can see, because there's debt on the other properties in the portfolio, what you're actually going to have to do is check with the bank, regardless of how the structures are set up, is are you going to have to pay back $600 on the sale or actually $800, because there's other lending in your portfolio, and the lending policies at banks change all the time. So you might find yourself in a situation where your income has changed since you originally got the debt, or the lending policy has become a bit tougher, which is happening a lot more often. So the way that you would get around to make sure that you get to keep this $200,000 from that sale is potentially move this property to another bank, and that way it's completely separated. It's got $600,000 of debt on it, and it's $800,000 property. Then if you sell it, it's clearly you're going to be able to keep that $200,000. And one way that we might actually do it is we would say, okay, before you sell, let's shift some of the debt onto the other properties. And then, so you might end up selling it when it only has $200,000 of debt on it. And in the situation where it's at the same bank, you might actually have to separate it completely, freehold it, or put it at another bank to really make sure that you're going to keep that money. Now, the way to set it up properly is consider using 2 banks right from the start, or to refinance one of your properties now, setting it up for the future sale. So you can see that in this situation, there's a property at a second bank that has $200,000 of equity in it, and there's not going to be any issues. If you sell this property, you're going to be able to keep the money, because this bank here, Bank A, let's say you put it with ASB, and this is Westpac. You're selling a property at ASB is a clear separation. There's not going to be any issues. And before you sell that property, you might even decide to shift some of that debt over. And what we're helping a lot of people do at the moment is separate securities and actually, remove this cross-collateralization, because when you have everything at one bank, what they do is they just treat it like a big pie. And they take all of your debt and all of your assets, combine it together, and then when you're trying to make financial decisions, selling or buying, they're looking at your whole situation. Whereas really you want to structure it so that you're giving yourself the advantage of having lots of different future options. And Westpac's never going to say, hey, the way that you can get what you want is to involve a second bank. ASB's never going to say that. Bankers are not going to say, hey, look, the way that you can do this is, why don't you freehold this property and don't let the bank have a claim over it. And so you've just got to say, hey, look, before I sell this property, am I going to get all of the money from the sale that I expect to get, or is the bank going to make me pay back the 600 plus this 200? And so I'm actually selling an asset that's producing cash for me and that's getting capital gains. And then the worst thing is you don't get the money and then you can't buy again. So what you've done is you've had a 3-property portfolio and then you can't buy that 3rd property again. And so you're putting yourself in a worse position by making sure you're not, by not asking the right questions. And so, that's what Mortgage Secrets is all about. You got to know what the right questions are to ask. So check out the case study below and fire questions our way if you've got them.